The CEO dressed as a janitor again, but this time, the new waitress knew he was hurting. The clock above the kitchen door read 11:47 p.m. The dinner rush had finally faded into silence. Only the soft hum of refrigerators and the distant clinking of dishes remained inside Hale's Table, one of Seattle's most beloved family restaurants. Most of the lights had already been dimmed. Chairs rested upside down on tables. The scent of fresh bread had long been replaced by coffee, sanitizer, and exhaustion. Near the center of the dining room, a janitor knelt quietly on the floor. Slowly, carefully, he scrubbed a dried coffee stain that no customer would ever notice. He wore a faded gray maintenance uniform, rubber gloves, a simple name tag, Adrian. Nothing about him suggested he owned the entire restaurant, or the 23 others across 3 states. His movements were almost meditative, as if every pass of the mop gave him permission not to think, not to remember, not to hurt. Footsteps approached behind him, light and quick, slightly uneven. He didn't turn around. The new waitress stopped beside him, balancing a tray with 3 empty coffee mugs. Emma Brooks had been working there for exactly 5 days. She was 24. She had already dropped 2 trays, mixed up 4 orders, accidentally called a customer grandpa, and somehow still managed to make everyone smile. She looked at the spotless floor, then she looked at the man holding the mop, not the uniform, not the bucket, his eyes, red, swollen, quietly exhausted. She offered the gentlest smile. "You missed a spot." Adrian glanced up instinctively. She pointed toward his face instead of the floor. "You cleaned the coffee perfectly." Her voice softened. "But you couldn't hide that you've been crying." Everything inside him froze. For 3 months, people had asked him if quarterly profits were recovering, if expansion plans were still on schedule, if the investors were satisfied, if he was doing okay. No one had actually looked at him. No one had noticed. Until now. Adrian lowered his eyes. "I'm fine." Emma tilted her head. That's usually what people say right before they admit they're definitely not. For a brief second, the corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. Before he simply nodded and returned to cleaning. Emma didn't push. She quietly carried her tray toward the kitchen. For reasons she couldn't explain, she suddenly felt sorry for a stranger she'd only met twice. 3 months earlier, Adrian Hale had buried the last member of his family. His father had died when Adrian was only 9. His mother, Margaret Hale, had built Hale's Table with him from a single neighborhood diner into one of the country's fastest-growing family restaurant chains. She had been his business partner, his mentor, his best friend. Cancer had taken her in less than a year. Since her funeral, every executive in the company had encouraged Adrian to take time off. Instead, he worked even longer hours. Every night, after every manager went home, Adrian changed into the same janitor uniform he had worn 20 years earlier when he was just a teenager, helping his mother close the restaurant. No one knew. Not because he wanted to test employees, because it was the only place where he still felt close to her. The smell of fresh detergent, the old mop closet, the worn-out cleaning cart. Every corner still whispered memories. Sometimes, that was enough to keep him breathing. Emma's life couldn't have been more different. She worked mornings at a neighborhood bakery, evenings at Hale's Table. Most of her paycheck disappeared into student loan payments and medical bills for her grandmother, the woman who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident years ago. She survived mostly on instant noodles, employee meals, and optimism. If optimism counted as food, it usually didn't. Still, Emma somehow laughed through almost everything, including her own disasters, especially her own disasters. The following evening proved exactly why. She hurried out of the kitchen carrying a large basket filled with polished silverware. One customer unexpectedly stepped backward. Emma swerved. The basket slipped. Hundreds of spoons exploded across the dining room floor with a sound that made every employee turn around. Silence. Emma closed her eyes. "Oh, that's impressive," she sighed. "I think I just invented silverware confetti." A few servers laughed. One manager rubbed his forehead. Before anyone else moved, the quiet janitor was already kneeling beside her. Without a word, Adrian began gathering spoons one by one. Emma dropped beside him. "You don't have to help. I'm the one making history." He simply continued collecting them. After a moment, she smiled. So, you new here? Adrian paused for half a second. You could say I'm back. She raised an eyebrow. Back? He nodded. Something like that. Emma tossed another spoon into the basket. Perfect. I got yelled at by a customer today. You apparently disappeared for years. She offered him her hand dramatically. I think we officially qualify to start the Society of Professional Failures. For the first time in months, a quiet laugh escaped Adrian before he could stop it. It wasn't loud, barely more than a breath, but it was real. Emma's eyes widened. There it is. What? You smile. I was starting to think your face had forgotten how. Adrian shook his head. You talk too much. I know. My grandma says I started talking before I learned how to walk. Another tiny smile. Then another. Neither of them noticed that the dining room somehow felt warmer. Later that night, Emma walked toward the storage room looking for extra napkins. The door was slightly open. She almost pushed it wider. Then she stopped. Inside, Adrian sat alone on an overturned supply crate, still wearing the janitor uniform, still holding the old silver wristwatch his mother had worn every day. He traced the cracked leather strap with his thumb, then quietly lowered his head. His shoulders trembled. No sound escaped, just silent tears falling onto worn work gloves. Emma immediately stepped backward. She gently pulled the door closed without making a sound. She didn't interrupt. She didn't tell anyone what she had seen. The next evening, when Adrian finished cleaning the dining room, he found a paper cup waiting beside the mop bucket. Hot chocolate, not coffee. A handwritten note rested beneath it. Coffee keeps people awake. Hot chocolate helps people breathe. Emma. Adrian stood there for a long time. The drink slowly warmed his hands. For the first time since losing his mother, something else warmed his heart. Emma Brooks did not ask Adrian why he cried in the storage room. She did not ask about the silver watch. She did not ask why a man with hands too well kept for a janitor moved through Hale's table like he knew every scar in the building. That was the strange thing about Emma. She talked constantly about small things. Burnt toast, bad customers, her grandmother's dramatic opinions about daytime television, the suspicious price of blueberries. But when something truly mattered, she knew how to be quiet. So the next night, Adrian found a small paper bag beside the cleaning cart. Inside was a blueberry muffin from the bakery where Emma worked mornings. A sticky note was attached. This one fell apart, so technically it's not charity. It's quality control. Adrian stared at it for nearly a minute. Then, despite himself, he smiled. The night after that, he found a second note taped to the mop handle. Reminder, floors can be cleaned tomorrow. People should sleep eventually. 2 days later, the flickering bulb in the back storage hallway had been replaced. Adrian noticed immediately. He had been meaning to fix it for weeks. Emma walked past him carrying a tray of water glasses, pretending not to see him looking up at the light. You changed that bulb, he said. She didn't stop walking. No idea what you're talking about. You're 5'4". 5'5" when emotionally motivated. The latter was locked. I'm not proud of everything I did. For the second time that week, Adrian laughed. Emma glanced back over her shoulder, pleased with herself. There, she said. That sound is much better than silent brooding. I don't brood. You absolutely brood. I think, with dramatic lighting. He opened his mouth to argue, then looked at the newly fixed bulb. Emma raised her eyebrows. He closed his mouth. Fine, he said. Maybe once. Once per hour? Per decade. Generous. And just like that, the empty restaurant no longer felt quite as empty. Emma did not know Adrian was rich. In fact, she was becoming increasingly convinced he was broke. He worked late. He wore worn gloves. He never ordered food for himself. And once, when she mentioned rent, his face tightened so painfully that she assumed he understood money problems better than most. So Emma did what Emma always did when she cared. She tried to help in the most awkward way possible. One night, Adrian hung his faded janitor jacket on the hook near the break room. 10 minutes later, he returned and found a folded $20 bill tucked into the pocket. He stared at it, then looked across the kitchen. Emma was wiping down menus with exaggerated innocence. Emma, she didn't look up. Yes, mysterious floor gentleman? Did you put money in my jacket? What? No, you're terrible at lying. I am excellent at lying. You're blushing. That's because the kitchen is hot. It's 68 degrees. I have a passionate circulatory system. Adrian pulled the bill from his pocket and placed it beside her elbow. I don't need this. Emma finally looked at him. Her expression softened. Maybe not. Then she pushed it back toward him. But maybe someday you will. Something in Adrian's chest tightened. He could have told her the truth right then. That the $20 was less than he usually tipped a valet. That the building around them carried his family name. That the payroll system she clocked into every evening ultimately answered to him. But the kindness on her face stopped him. Because it wasn't pity. It wasn't admiration. It was simply Emma seeing someone she thought was struggling and deciding he should not struggle alone. The next night, Adrian slipped the $20 bill into her apron pocket. Emma found it halfway through her shift. She narrowed her eyes at him from across the dining room. He raised one eyebrow. She pointed two fingers at her eyes, then at him. He pretended not to understand. By closing time, the bill was back in his jacket. The next morning, Emma found it inside her locker. By Friday, the $20 had appeared in a sugar jar, under a stack of napkins, inside a box of disposable gloves, and once, very dramatically, taped to the bottom of Adrian's mop bucket. Emma discovered that one only after she had accused the dishwasher of financial sabotage. Adrian watched from the corner, trying not to smile. You think this is funny? She asked. A little. I am helping you. You are attacking me with currency. It's emotional support money. That is not a real category. It is now. For a man who had spent 3 months surrounded by condolences that felt like polished stones, Emma's ridiculous stubbornness felt strangely alive. One slow Thursday night, the assistant manager asked Emma and Adrian to reorganize the dry storage room after closing. Emma entered with a clipboard and the confidence of someone who had no idea what she was doing. Adrian followed behind with a box cutter and the quiet patience of a man preparing for disaster. Okay, Emma announced. Canned tomatoes go here. Flour goes there. Mysterious unlabeled boxes go into the category of possible crimes. Adrian picked up one of the boxes. It says napkins. That's what it wants us to think. He looked at her. She looked back. Then they both laughed. For nearly an hour, they worked side by side. She stood on tiptoe to reach high shelves. He silently took the heavier boxes from her hands before she could argue. She pretended not to notice. He pretended not to care. Between stacks of pasta and paper towels, conversation came easily. Emma told him about her grandmother, Ruth, who believed every man under 40 was either confused, hungry, or both. Adrian listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, his voice changed, softer, less guarded. He told her his mother had loved restaurants because hungry people were honest. Emma smiled. I like her already. Adrian looked down at the box in his hands. She would have liked you. The words slipped out before he could stop them. For a moment, neither of them moved. Emma's smile faded into something gentler. Then she had good taste. Adrian looked at her, and for one quiet second, the storage room felt warmer than any ballroom he had ever stood in. The moment ended when David Langley walked in. David was the new floor manager, 38, the kind of man who smiled only when someone important was watching. His eyes landed on Adrian, kneeling beside a spilled box of straws. What is this? Emma straightened. We're reorganizing storage. David ignored her and looked at Adrian. You call this organized? Adrian slowly rose. I was moving the heavier boxes first. David stepped closer. You were moving too slowly. Emma's face changed. Adrian noticed immediately. The humor disappeared. David pointed toward the corner, where a small streak of dust lined the baseboard. Clean that again. Adrian said nothing. David's voice grew louder. I said clean it again. Are you deaf? A few kitchen employees turned to look. Adrian lowered his eyes. The sadness that crossed his face was so quick, most people would have missed it. Emma did not. She stepped forward. He heard you. David turned toward her. Excuse me. I said he heard you. Everyone heard you. The dry goods heard you. The napkins are traumatized. No one laughed. David's jaw tightened. You're new here, Miss Brooks. I suggest you learn when to stay quiet. Emma swallowed, but she did not step back. And I suggest you learn that people clean better when they're treated like people. The room went still. David's face hardened. Careful, waitresses are replaceable. Adrian's head lifted. For the first time, something dangerous moved behind his eyes. But before he could speak, Emma answered, "So are managers." A stunned silence followed. One of the cooks dropped a spoon. David's face flushed red. "You just earned yourself a formal warning." Emma's chin trembled slightly, but she held her ground. "Fine." David took one step toward her. "Maybe I should make it a termination." Adrian moved beside her. His voice was low. "Don't." Emma looked at him, surprised. She expected anger, defiance, maybe even gratitude. Instead, his eyes were filled with something much sadder, not fear, recognition, as if he had heard men like David speak this way too many times, as if every cruel word had landed somewhere old and bruised. "Please," Adrian said quietly, "don't lose your job because of me." Emma looked from Adrian to David, then back again. For the first time since she met him, she wondered who this man really was, and why someone who looked so broken seemed more worried about her losing everything than about himself being humiliated. After the incident with David, Emma started watching Adrian more closely. Not in a suspicious way. At least, that was what she told herself. She was simply being observant, professionally observant, waitress observant, completely normal, absolutely not emotionally invested observant. But the more she watched him, the less sense he made. For a janitor, Adrian knew too much. When the prep cook complained that the kitchen kept running out of basil by Friday, Adrian quietly said, "That's because the Tuesday produce order is based on last quarter's traffic, not this month's." The cook blinked. Emma blinked harder. When a server asked why the lunch menu had changed, Adrian murmured, "Lower margin items were probably moved to dinner to increase table value." Emma nearly dropped a pitcher of water, and when the new hostess forgot the seating rotation, Adrian explained the system so clearly that even the assistant manager stopped pretending not to listen. Emma cornered him later near the coffee station. "Okay," she said, folding her arms. "Confession time." Adrian looked at her. "I didn't eat your granola bar." "That was you?" "No. It was absolutely you. It was emergency food. It tasted like cardboard with ambition." Emma pointed at him. "Don't distract me. Why do you know so much about menu pricing?" Adrian wiped a counter that was already clean. "I listen. You listen to food costs. Sometimes. You explained labor scheduling yesterday. It was a slow night. You corrected the wine pairing list. It was wrong." Emma narrowed her eyes. "Adrian Hale, were you secretly a CEO in a past life?" His hand paused for half a second. Then he said dryly, "Some people used to think so." Emma laughed. "Wow, that was either a joke or the saddest sentence I've ever heard." "Could be both. That's your problem. I have many. You hide serious things inside jokes." Adrian looked at her then, really looked. Emma suddenly forgot what she was going to say, because beneath his quiet humor was something she recognized, a man who had learned to make himself useful so no one would ask if he was lonely. The next afternoon, the kitchen staff prepared samples for a new dessert menu. Emma decided Adrian needed cultural development, which, according to her, meant tasting 7 different puddings while wearing a ridiculous apron. The apron was pink, with cartoon cats, wearing tiny chef hats. Adrian stared at it as if it were a legal threat. "No." Emma held it up. "Yes, I clean floors. And today, sir, you clean your soul." "My soul does not need cats. Everyone's soul needs cats." The pastry chef, Maria, laughed from the prep table. "Come on, Adrian. Be brave." Adrian looked around. 4 cooks, 2 servers, 1 dishwasher, all watching. Emma smiled sweetly. "Are you afraid of kittens?" "I'm afraid of becoming whatever this is. That's growth." Before he could escape, Emma stepped behind him and tied the apron around his waist. The kitchen erupted. Adrian stood perfectly still, wearing rubber gloves, a maintenance uniform, and a pink cat apron. Emma took 1 step back, admiring her work. "You look like a man who has finally accepted joy." "I look like I lost a bet." "You did, with life." Maria handed him a spoonful of chocolate bread pudding. Adrian tasted it. Everyone waited. He nodded. "Too much cinnamon," Maria gasped. Emma pointed at him. "See? Food snob. It overwhelms the chocolate. The sous chef took another bite, then frowned. He's right. The entire kitchen went quiet. Emma slowly turned to Adrian. You are suspicious. I have taste buds. You have executive taste buds. Adrian gave her a look. Emma laughed so hard she nearly knocked over a tray of ramekins. And then it happened. Adrian laughed too. A real laugh. Deep, unprepared, alive. Everyone in the kitchen heard it. For a moment, the room changed. Even the old dishwasher looked up and smiled. Emma did not tease him this time. She only watched him with a softness he was not ready for. Adrian felt it, and it frightened him more than grief did. Because grief, at least, was familiar. Being cared for was not. That night, after closing, Emma and Adrian sat at the small employee table near the back door. Rain pressed against the windows. The restaurant smelled like lemon cleaner and cooling bread. Emma had saved 2 bowls of soup from the kitchen. Don't argue, she said, sliding one toward him. It's not charity, it's soup relocation. Adrian accepted it. I didn't say anything. You were about to. I was breathing. With judgment. He took a spoonful. For a while, they ate in comfortable silence. Then Emma's phone buzzed. She checked it and smiled sadly. My grandmother wants to know if I remembered to eat dinner. She sounds wise. She is. Terrifying, but wise. Emma stirred her soup. She raised me after my parents died. I was 14. She sold her wedding ring to help pay for my school uniforms, then told me she'd lost it in the laundry. Adrian's expression softened. She sounds like someone who loved by doing. Emma looked at him. That's exactly it. Then she asked gently, Your mom was like that too? Adrian's hand tightened around the spoon. For a moment, Emma worried she had gone too far. But then he nodded. She built this place before it became what it is now. Emma waited. She used to say a restaurant wasn't about food. It was about giving tired people a place to sit down. Emma smiled. I would have loved her. Adrian looked at the rain. She would have loved you first. The words came out quietly, almost painfully. Emma's heart shifted. There was something in his voice that made her want to reach across the table and take his hand. She didn't. Not yet. Instead, she leaned back and said, Well, obviously, I'm very lovable. Adrian looked at her, then smiled. That is not usually how lovable people describe themselves. It's called confidence. It's called questionable branding. She laughed, and he realized, with a strange ache in his chest, that he wanted to hear that laugh again tomorrow, and the day after, and maybe every day after that. The realization scared him so much he looked away. Emma noticed. Of course she did, but once again, she did not push. 2 evenings later, everything changed. Emma was restocking napkins near the hallway when she saw Adrian speaking quietly with a man in a dark suit. The man looked serious. Too serious. Adrian's face had gone pale. Then the suited man gestured toward the private elevator that led to the executive floor. Emma's stomach dropped. No. After David's humiliation in the storage room, she had been waiting for something like this. Adrian was being reported, or fired, or blamed for something he had not done. The elevator doors opened. Adrian stepped inside. Emma moved before thinking. She dropped the stack of napkins onto a chair and hurried down the hallway. Adrian? He didn't hear her. The elevator doors slid shut. Emma reached them too late. She stabbed the button. Nothing. Of course. Private access. Are you kidding me? She whispered. She looked around, then spotted the service stairs. Her heart pounded as she ran up 2 flights. By the time she reached the executive hallway, she was breathless, furious, and ready to defend a man who had never asked anyone to defend him. She followed the sound of voices to a pair of heavy glass doors. Inside, through the narrow gap between the blinds. Adrian stood at the head of a long conference table, not sitting, standing. Around him were board members, executives, lawyers, the kind of people Emma had only seen in company brochures, and every single one of them was waiting for him to speak. Emma froze. One woman in a navy suit said, Mr. Hale, the board needs your decision tonight. Mr. Hale. The words hit Emma harder than any shout could have. Adrian turned slightly. The light caught his face. He was not being fired. He was not being questioned. He was in charge. Emma stepped backward. Her breath caught. Then, From inside the conference room, Adrian looked toward the door. Their eyes met through the narrow opening. For one terrible second, neither of them moved, and Emma realized the man she had been trying to save had been hiding an entire world from her. Emma did not remember walking down the stairs. One moment she was standing outside the executive conference room, staring through glass doors at Adrian Hale, in front of an entire board of directors. The next, she was back in the employee hallway with her hand pressed against the wall, trying to breathe. Mr. Hale, the name repeated in her head. Not Adrian, the man who wore a ridiculous cat apron because she had bullied him into joy. Adrian Hale, the CEO, the owner, the man whose name was printed on her paycheck. Emma let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, Emma," she whispered to herself, "you gave $20 to a millionaire." Her eyes burned. It would have been funny if it did not hurt so much. She hurried toward the locker room, grabbed her coat, and ignored Maria calling after her from the kitchen. Outside, rain fell hard against the alley pavement. Emma pushed through the back door and stepped into the cold without an umbrella. She just needed to leave, before she cried, before she embarrassed herself, before she remembered every soft thing she had said to him and wondered if he had been laughing at her the whole time. The door opened behind her. "Emma." She kept walking. "Emma, please." She stopped near the dumpsters, turned around, and found Adrian standing in the rain, still wearing his white dress shirt from the boardroom. No janitor uniform, just the truth. "You're the CEO," she said. Adrian's face tightened. "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Great. Wonderful. Very normal thing to forget to mention." "I didn't forget. That makes it worse." He took one step closer. She stepped back. "Did everyone know?" "No." "Was I some kind of test?" "No." "Were you seeing how the poor new waitress would treat the poor sad janitor?" His voice dropped. "Never." Emma laughed, but it broke halfway through. "I put money in your jacket. I know. I felt sorry for you. I know. I defended you in front of David. I know." "Then what was this?" she asked, her voice rising. "What was I to you, Adrian? Entertainment? That hurt him. She saw it. Good. Part of her wanted it to hurt." Adrian looked down, rain darkening his hair. "I never lied to you." Emma stared at him. "That is not the defense you think it is. You never asked. Because normal people don't ask janitors if they secretly own the building." For 1 second, despite everything, something almost like a smile crossed his face. Then it disappeared. "You're right." The simple admission stole some of her anger, which made her even angrier. Adrian did not try to touch her. He did not throw power around like a shield. He just stood there in the rain and let her be hurt. Finally, he said, "My mother used to tell me something." Emma looked away. "I'm not sure I want a beautiful dead mother explanation right now." "I know," but he continued softly. "She said if there ever came a day when I stopped understanding the people who worked for us, I should put on the first uniform I ever wore and close the restaurant myself." Emma's jaw tightened. Adrian looked toward the glowing back door of Hale's table. "When I was 16, I cleaned floors here every night with her. She said a dining room looked different from your knees. She said you noticed who left quietly, who worked hungry, who smiled only because they had to." His voice weakened. "After she died, I couldn't sit in my office. Everyone wanted decisions, speeches, numbers, confidence." He swallowed. "But down here, in that uniform, I could remember her." Emma's anger softened against her will. He looked back at her. "I didn't come back to test anyone." "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because you looked at me like I was just a person." The rain filled the silence between them. Adrian's eyes were red again, just like the first night. "And I needed to be just a person for a while." Emma's heart ached. That was the worst part. She believed him, but believing him did not erase the humiliation. It did not erase the fact that she had shared pieces of her life with a man who had kept the largest part of his hidden. "I need to go home," she said. Adrian nodded. "I'll call you a car." "No." The word came out too quickly, too sharp. She softened it only a little. "I can get myself home." Adrian's face fell, but he accepted it. "Okay." Emma turned away. This time, he did not follow. For the next 2 days, Emma worked like someone trying not to feel. She smiled at customers. She refilled water glasses. She dropped only one fork, which Maria called significant emotional progress. But Adrian was everywhere, not physically. He did not come downstairs. That somehow made it worse. The mop bucket stayed untouched in the corner. The cat apron hung on a hook like evidence from a happier crime scene. Emma hated how much she missed him. She hated that she still saved him a muffin before remembering he probably had private chefs, nutritionists, and a fruit bowl that cost more than her phone bill. On the third evening, David found her alone near the service station. He had clearly been waiting. "So," he said, with a smile that made her skin crawl. "You found out." Emma kept polishing a glass. "I'm working. You should be grateful, you know." She looked at him. "For what?" "That Mr. Hale amused himself with you instead of firing you." The glass froze in her hand. David leaned against the counter. "Don't look so offended. You're a waitress, Emma. A charming one, maybe, but still a waitress." Her fingers tightened around the towel. "He's grieving. You were convenient." Soft voice, big eyes, sad little backstory. Emma's throat closed. "Stop." David lowered his voice. "Men like Adrian Hale don't build lives with girls like you. They recover. They move on. They marry someone appropriate." Every word landed exactly where he wanted it to, in her doubt. In the part of her that had always feared being someone people passed through on their way to better things. David straightened his tie. "My advice? Leave before people start laughing." Emma said nothing, because if she opened her mouth, she might cry, and she would not give David that. That night, after her shift, she stood in front of her locker for a long time. Then she took off her name tag. Emma Brooks. 5 days ago, it had felt like a fresh start. Now it felt like a warning label. Maria walked in and saw the resignation note in Emma's hand. "No," Maria said immediately. Emma forced a smile. "It's better this way." "For who?" "For everyone. That is what people say when they're about to do something stupid and noble." Emma laughed softly, then wiped her cheek. "I can't stay and become a rumor." "You're not a rumor." "I will be." Maria's face softened. Emma folded the resignation note and placed it on the manager's desk. No dramatic goodbye, no final speech, just a quiet exit through the back door. The same door where Adrian had once stood in the rain and told her the truth too late. Upstairs, in the executive office, Adrian found out 20 minutes later. He stared at the resignation note. Read it once, then again. There were only 2 sentences. "Thank you for the opportunity. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." Adrian sat down slowly. For the first time since his mother died, the restaurant did not feel like a memory. It felt empty. After Emma left, Hale's table did not fall apart. That would have been easier. The kitchen still opened on time. Servers still smiled at customers. Reservations were still full. Plates still left the pass hot and beautiful. From the outside, nothing had changed. But Adrian noticed everything. No muffin beside the cleaning cart. No ridiculous warnings taped to the coffee machine. No voice in the storage room accusing the napkins of hiding criminal evidence. The restaurant had always carried the memory of his mother. Now it carried the absence of Emma too. And somehow, that felt even harder to walk through. For 3 nights, Adrian did not put on the janitor uniform. He stayed upstairs in his office, surrounded by glass, numbers, and silence. He told himself it was better, cleaner, more appropriate. But every time he looked down through the office window at the dining room below, he realized the truth. He had not returned to the night shift because of the uniform. He had returned because of grief. But he had stayed because of Emma, not because she needed him, because she had seen him on the floor with a mop and never once made him feel small. On the 4th morning, Adrian found Emma's address in her employee file. Then he closed the file immediately. "No," he muttered to himself, "that is creepy." 10 minutes later, Maria walked into his office without knocking, placed a paper bag on his desk, and said, "Her grandmother needs her porch railing fixed." Adrian looked up. Maria shrugged. "I am not giving you her address. I am giving you a humanitarian project." Inside the bag was a muffin, blueberry, half broken. Adrian stared at it. Maria pointed at him. "Do not mess this up." He didn't. That afternoon, Adrian arrived at a small yellow house on a quiet street, wearing jeans, a plain jacket, and holding a toolbox he had bought 30 minutes earlier. Emma opened the door. For several seconds, Neither of them spoke. Then she looked at the toolbox. You know how to fix porch railings? Adrian glanced down. I watched 2 videos. Oh, good. Certified by Panic. I also brought screws. That does make me feel emotionally safer. He almost smiled. Emma, I'm not here to pressure you. Then why are you here? He looked past her toward the crooked railing. To help. She studied him carefully. No checks? No. No dramatic billionaire solution. No. No secretly buying the whole neighborhood. I was told that would be creepy. It would. He nodded. Then just the railing. From inside the house, an elderly voice called, If he is handsome, let him in. If he is rich, make him useful first. Emma closed her eyes. Adrian's mouth twitched. That's my grandmother. She sounds wise. She is. Unfortunately. Ruth Brooks liked Adrian immediately, which annoyed Emma, mostly because Ruth did not even pretend to be subtle. She sat by the window with a blanket over her knees, watching Adrian struggle with the porch railing while Emma handed him tools. Wrong screwdriver, Ruth called through the screen. Adrian paused. Emma looked at the tool in his hand. She's right. I knew that. You were testing the screwdriver? Yes. For emotional maturity? Exactly. Emma laughed before she could stop herself. Adrian looked at her. That small sound did more to him than any board meeting ever had. Over the next week, he came by twice more. Not with flowers, with groceries, a repaired porch light, a soup recipe he claimed he had not ruined. Ruth disagreed. It tastes like a rich man guessing at salt, she declared. Adrian accepted the criticism with dignity. Emma laughed so hard she had to sit down. Slowly, the anger between them loosened. Not disappeared, but loosened. Adrian drove Ruth to a medical appointment when Emma's morning shift ran late. He sat in the waiting room reading outdated magazines. He carried Ruth's prescriptions without making a speech about it, and Emma began to see the difference. He was not trying to buy forgiveness. He was trying to become trustworthy in small, ordinary ways, the kind money could not fake for long. Then came Friday night. Emma was washing dishes at home when Ruth called from the living room. Her voice sounded thin, too thin. Emma? By the time Emma reached her, Ruth was gripping the arm of her chair, one hand pressed to her chest. The next 20 minutes became a blur. 911. Flashing lights. A paramedic asking questions Emma could barely answer. The hospital smell. The bright hallway. The terrible words, "We're running more tests." Emma stood outside the emergency room, shaking so badly she could not unlock her phone. When she finally did, she did not think. She called Adrian. He answered on the second ring. Emma? Her voice cracked. It's Grandma. That was all she managed. Adrian stood in the middle of a shareholder meeting, surrounded by investors, legal counsel, and a presentation that had taken 6 weeks to prepare. Every face turned toward him. Mr. Hale? Someone said. We need your decision. Adrian was already walking toward the door. My decision is to leave. Now? Yes. 15 minutes later, he entered the hospital waiting room, breathless, tie loosened, rain on his shoulders. Emma saw him and broke. Not loudly, her face simply crumpled. Adrian crossed the room and sat beside her. He did not tell her everything would be fine. He did not promise what he could not control. He only took her hand and stayed. Hour after hour. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped behind closed doors. Emma leaned against him sometime after midnight, too tired to keep pretending she was strong. You left your company, she whispered. Adrian looked down at their joined hands. It will survive one night without me. She swallowed. I thought you'd choose it. He was quiet for a moment, then he smiled sadly. 3 months ago, I lost the most important person in my life. Emma looked up. Adrian's voice softened. I'm not willing to lose another one because I was sitting in the wrong room. Tears slipped down her cheeks. This time she did not hide them. And when Adrian gently tightened his hand around hers, Emma finally let herself hold on. 1 year later, the newest Hale's table opened on a bright Saturday afternoon. The ribbon outside the entrance was gold. The windows shone. The dining room was filled with employees, reporters, investors, and families from the neighborhood. At the front of it all stood Adrian Hale in a perfectly tailored navy suit. Calm and confident, alive in a way people had not seen for a long time. When he finished his opening speech, the room filled with applause. Emma stood near Ruth's wheelchair, clapping with tears already threatening her eyes. Adrian looked at her across the room. Then he cleared his throat. "I need 5 minutes." Emma frowned. 5 minutes for what? You'll see. He disappeared through the kitchen doors. When he returned, the applause turned into confused laughter. Adrian was no longer wearing the navy suit. He wore the faded gray janitor uniform, the old name tag, the same work gloves. Emma covered her mouth, laughing through her tears. "Are you seriously going to mop the floor during your own grand opening?" Adrian walked toward her. "No." He stopped in front of her, his voice steady but soft. "I just wanted to remember where I started." Then he reached into the pocket of the old uniform. "And remember who made me want to start again." Emma froze. The room went silent. Adrian lowered himself to one knee. In his hand was a simple diamond ring, tucked inside the same pocket where she had once hidden a $20 bill. "Emma Brooks," he said, smiling through his own tears. "This time, I'm asking before you accuse me of hiding important information." A wave of gentle laughter moved through the room. Emma laughed too, one hand pressed to her heart. Adrian looked up at her. "Would you spend the rest of your life with me?" He paused, then added softly, "And maybe join me for the night shift forever?" Emma wiped her cheeks. "Only if you promise me one thing. Anything. Don't ever try to mop up your tears alone again." Adrian's face broke into the kind of smile she had spent a year helping him find. "I promise." Emma nodded. "Yes." The room exploded with applause. Ruth shouted, "Finally!" loudly enough to embarrass everyone. Adrian stood, pulled Emma into his arms, and held her as if he had finally come home. Later, after the guests had left and the music had faded, Adrian and Emma changed into uniforms together. Side by side, they cleaned the last few drops of spilled champagne from the dining room floor. A new young employee watched them in confusion. "Why is the CEO doing that?" Emma smiled, glancing at Adrian. "Because he never forgot where he began." Adrian took her hand. Emma squeezed it gently. "And because he never wants to forget where his heart was healed." Sometimes the people carrying the heaviest burdens are the ones who work the hardest to hide them. Adrian didn't need someone to admire his success. He needed someone willing to notice his pain. And Emma never fell in love with a CEO. She fell in love with a man who kept showing up with kindness, humility, and a heart that had forgotten how to heal. I believe the strongest relationships aren't built when someone rescues us with money or status. They're built when two people quietly help each other carry the weight neither one should have to bear alone. What about you? If you were in Emma's place, would you have walked away after discovering Adrian's secret? Or would you have stayed and listened to his story? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories, and join us for more emotional love stories. Thank you.